Good afternoon. We'll start in just a little bit, right on the hour. So I hope everyone's doing well. And I'm just doing a time check. Today I'm going to be on time, or I don't know. We're going to talk about a little bit about that. So as you're getting on, and when we start today, we're looking at oh, there we are. Okay. um, Good afternoon, Oki. Welcome to the Native Wellness Power Hour. And today, when I was thinking about what I was going to share with you in this time that we're in this connection together, I used the title Spiritual Momentum and Your Wellness Journey. And I've been giving some consideration really about what I wanted to share and be mindful about. But I'd like to start this hour right now, really in the comments. I've heard stories from earlier telephone conversations and communications today about, all our relatives that are touched by earth events, by the wildfires in California and in Oregon and in the Western United States were impacted, by the wildfires. And they are changing, in a time of change, they're changing the landscape for many communities. And people are not able to maybe give as much in-person support as they're hoping or connect immediately with family members. So today at the beginning of the Power Hour, I just want everybody that's joining and throughout your day just to let all those people know that are impacted by those events that are beyond our control, that we love them. So from whatever piece of the earth you are on, you send love out to all those families, to all those people, to the earth, to the animals, to the winged ones, to the water that is bearing really people's hope that their families make it through this. And I would also like to ask everybody that's watching right now to think of all the families, Indigenous families and non-Indigenous families, every family in the human family that right now is struggling to hold on to a loved one who is has been infected by the COVID-19 virus. Part of the last 2 weeks of my life journey right now is watching the passage of many elders in our community. And what they passed from was not COVID-19. But I've also seen pleas on social media, people I talk to, some of my own relatives have survived COVID-19. And to really remember those people and send love out to them. So right now, if your family members have been, or your community has been touched by COVID-19, causing your community members to become ill or, pass away, or just having to change their whole stepping in the world because of COVID-19. I would like to ask all of you to send out that love to all the people of the human family. And sometimes when I am walking around in my own safe space in my house, I just tell myself randomly, I'm sending my love to them, or when I hear or receive pleas through social media or telephone or some other form of communication, or I hear stories when I from my family members about what people are going through now. That in a way that is the gift of the journey we're on, is that love knows no geography. It is not bound by a structure or a place on earth. You can send that love out, because in love is that spiritual uplifting. And if you are told by somebody that they love you, immediately you get that like mist of air, mist of that spiritual cloak that goes over you. So it is my privilege today I want to say to all of you, I love you. I love you. I am glad you are here. We are all connected, and we will all make it through this time. And the way that we make it through, I've had the privilege, you know, like if you looked at my checking account, you might be saying, ooh, but I'm not talking about cash. You know, there's some of those popular songs, you know, money can't buy love and stuff like that. And I think we're kind of recovering from messages from the outer cultures that no, you know, if you got stiletto heels and you bought some woman's hair from India, you know, and you got the lip filler, and you know, if you have these material things, then you're beautiful, you're successful. And that may be true. But I want to share with you today some stories about how in my wellness journey, the jewels, the spiritual jewels that were laid in front of me, or the cloaks that were put over me at times of challenges, how they uplifted me, and through instructions, how I began to move through my journey. And then, you know, I tried something new before the power hour. And I just want you to all know that today there will be a special guest. And so when we're on this journey today, so I thought, well, you know, sometimes using the English language, right, it's tricky, right? Because, you know, now it's don't say that word, don't say this word, don't say that word, don't talk like that, don't do this, don't do that. You know, we're getting a lot of those, how we have to craft our story now, like the little censorships. But many, many times when I was in on Peguas First Nation, sitting among the beauty there that is at Mututu Lake, the vibrancy of the medicines and the vibrancy of the people. Many times I heard messages that they took me, and I said, when I felt that message internally, it's that spiritual food, it's that spiritual nourishment. I had a moment where I said, that's why I came here. That's why I ended up in this place. And I've had many of those in my lifetime. And I've always had to be open to the spiritual journey that we're all on, as open up to those teachers, those people that some people use the English word elder, you know, there's all sorts of words, but that person that nourishes your spirit so that you feel enlivened. You are now experiencing life like fully there in the moment. And on my journey, I heard this term. So when I thought of talking about spiritual momentum today, I heard many elders from different cultures in different parts of the world where I've been say in some way that all solutions are spiritual. And I really took that to heart, and it changed my life. earlier when I was younger, when I wasn't sure that sort of my path in life is I'm a traveler. I go to communities, but I always come home. One of my relatives described it as they said, "Oh, you're one of those rubber band Indians, you know, where your home is. You stretch out, then you snap back." So I thought that was a good description. And among my people, among the Piikani or the Blackfoot Confederacy, there have always been those people that journey out far and they come back, they journey out on behalf of the people, and they are carrying the people's intention. And every generation carries that intention of the ancestors. We carry that intention of the future generations. But it's can be exciting and it can be fun and it's celebratory. Because when I think of, yeah, this morning I told somebody a story about when I went up to Fort Yukon and hi everybody up there in Alaska, how I didn't want to be rude or greedy because those are two kind of things that I learned early on when I was little, that you don't want to behave like that. Don't be that way. Don't be somehow. But we all were eating lunch, and when they served us moose, which was delicious, and then I noticed in the pot was still the big bone. So I thought, well, how can I ask about that big bone and what they're going to do with that marrow? So it ended up, I did ask, and then they said, oh, well, we usually share it. So, they were fixing it and they're parceling it out. And one of the non-native women that I was traveling with at that time under that effort for Indigenous foods, she did that had pushed her bubble too far. And so she politely declined. But what I seen them do when she declined is they didn't give somebody an extra piece. They made sure everybody had some. And then I found out as we were traveling on that trip that one of the fish that was given to by a family for us to enjoy had been one of two fishes that they had caught the day before for their family. And so those folks up there, they gave me their spiritual food so that as I was journeying through that time where we were making connections to really strengthen every community, that they fed me not only on the physical plane, but they fed me spiritually. And when I was flying up there on the little bush plane, I just had this moment when we crossed the Arctic Circle, because my two grandmas, they traveled in their life, but they did not go far. And I had this feeling like I almost wanted to go, where this is in my family. I represented all the women at that time and all my family members. And I can remember thinking and telling myself, I hope all my younger family members, all my family members that want to travel, that want to see the earth, that they get that. And so I was sending my good luck, my opportunity to my family members in prayer, flying in that bush plane. And I can also remember when we landed, one of the gentlemen, you don't want to be somehow in other people's community, don't want to be rumbling around and ruckusing and stuff. So when I got off the plane, he was convinced that we had met before, but that was the first time I was at Fort Yukon. And he told me, oh, you're one of those people. And I was like, okay. But he said it in a good way, in a good brotherly, joking way. And he goes, you're one of those people that when they go somewhere, they remind people of their relatives or their ancestors. And I don't want to say I have like a generic face because I've never met a generic Indigenous person, just saying. But what I took in that moment was getting off that plane and thinking of my grandmothers and all my younger relatives, the generations that were held captive on the reservations, but all those generations before. I also thought of an ancient story I heard about when we heard changes coming to our people, how 7 people left the Confederacy and journeyed south. And I took that to say, I am living in the tradition. Yeah, I flew on a plane here. I'm landing here. This is not our territory. We in the Confederacy know a lot about many brilliant things, but we are not canoe people. I'm just going to lay it out there. If you disagree, send me a private message on my other page. No, I'm joking. But in that moment, what I felt was I felt this centering and this connection because I was acknowledged by that Indigenous man as he placed me within a connection because they have those stories also of their people who go and travel, of who are able to, and one time you're on the river and then the next time you're in a conference room or you're walking down a street in a foreign country. And he acknowledged me. And that's also in that moment when you acknowledge somebody or you acknowledge even yourself, you have that connection. You're connecting to seeing that whole being, and you're acknowledging all those spiritual, if you want to say, dynamics. You're seeing that person as a really, truly a whole person. Because many times in life, I have had the experience, and I've met other people where we are sort of like we're in rhythm for a time. So we're on a same journey and we have a rhythm. Some of them are not from the same tribe I am or the same culture. And you have a rhythm that you're like-hearted people that have met on a journey and you have a connection. And then when your destination or your task or maybe just even the traveling time is done, you go back your separate ways. But there is that acknowledgement that sometimes in the wellness journey, often I've heard it described like, my family of choice, my family of origin, or if you look collectively, I just had a conversation with somebody saying that, the changes in all the organizations that are happening, and some organizations, this might be their exit, right? They might morph into something, or they decide to uh, put that lodge out and go in another direction. And their task, their focus will change. But we remain Indigenous people. So often I can tell when I lived in Italy, this sounds like, right, I said I get around. I could really tell when you met an American or you met someone for the United States, because one, they would just drop in back into Americanese, oh, and what are you doing here? Are you visiting, or or I don't know, performing an Indian dance in the square? I don't know, but there's always that what your work did was your identity. And not too long ago, I told my mom that, really I don't, I don't have what, I have a resume and all that kind of stuff, but um, I don't have a label of a career, because I always think of myself first and foremost as a Piikani woman, as a Niswitipi, as a human being. And what I do to negotiate through this time so that I meet the world on its terms and, get through it, is not all who I am. It's a part of my story. But I have met people that where I meet them is where they're at. And we have points of connection, and the acknowledgement of the diversity of people's choices in life, of their path. All of those stories is what makes up our human family. And for Indigenous people, our story is unique and particular, and we are the experts on that, because only us have been gifted these spirits, these spiritual identities, these spiritual connections that make us a different type of whole person. Not any greater in value in the human family, because we're all equal, or not less. And really, that's also something that a question, a task, a request that I want to make of everybody watching, or as you move through this, and maybe to remind your family members that telling your story of this time from your perspective, from your experience, that is the stories of victory that will live beyond this time. Those are the wisdom. That's the gifting that you are going to be a part of. We're all a part of it right now. So I would like to ask this question, and those of you that have seen me here before, I write things down, because, I could go on, start talking about Mars and stuff like that. Elon Musk, whatever. I don't think he's ever been to a powwow, but, there's a challenge. Um, but what is your story of now? And so when you talk about, or I tell you my story of now, sometimes it's the physical actions, right? I got up, you see, I combed my hair, I added things, that I'm going to talk about and share with you. But there's also that spiritual story of how I prepared to meet the day long before I joined you here. How I thought about dreams I had. Um, and it's not all, sometimes dreams are the dynamic messages that are they're helping us. They're the place where, the creator, the ancestors, the spiritual beings gift you in those times. And but sometimes they're about the pressure of everyday life. Maybe you need a new pair of shoes and you have a dream about that. So dreams, they inform our waking hours. But today, I have that interior also reality going on, to recognize that I would say I'm in like my third cycle of catching my breath during COVID-19 pandemic. And what I mean by that is the end is still in the mist for us right now. The end is still at that sunrise that hasn't happened. But we are all in a state of transformation. And so sometimes I censor what comes into my house. I'll take a break from this, I'll take a break from that, or I Also, my safe space is my household, because I'm also responsible to honor the connections I have in the real world in my family relationships, in keeping participating to keep my tribe safe by my behavior. And so I've made that commitment. But I can tell that from early on, so the day that you realized or were told in the COVID-19 pandemic that you must stay at home, you must shelter in place, you have to learn these whole new hygiene habits, right? Um, because many, many years ago, I heard a study where like about 30 people after they use the restroom, they don't wash their hands. And so, and then my journey was traveling, right? So I was a bottom door kicker. If I could kick the exit, I, got towels with my elbow. Like I had already little techniques. But even me, part of my story is the first part of the pandemic. I never washed my hands so much in my entire life. And I had to help my hands because they started to wear under all that detergent. But I don't know if I wore off the skin or whatever and new skin came up. It's like being exfoliated. But my hands started to adapt. And so at the beginning of the pandemic, what was your feelings? What was your reaction? That is the story that you're working on, that we're living every day. We start every day during this time. Sometimes we have notes on the page if you want to think about a book, but sometimes there's large vacant spaces. And so what are those? And for those of you that have been through a native wellness training and other trainings, we use this exercise that's called the river of life. And you put on significant days, significant events in your life. And some of those are healing touch points of things that you identified you need to heal from on your wellness journey. But sometimes there's also those wellness victories, those wellness points, landmarks along that river when people do that exercise. And I was really thinking about that today when I was going to, be here on this time together with you. And there were some connecting points in my life and stories I'd like to share. But I also told myself that, the good thing about social media and learning how to negotiate this landscape, I kind of treat it like it's not an experiment, but it is an adventure, right? So I wanted to talk a little bit about, this is not a real parrot, so don't worry. This poor parrot's not living on the Rocky Mountain front because we had a heavy snowfall the other day. It's okay. But this parrot is from Panama. And this was a wedding gift from, not mine, sorry, this was my friend's wedding gift, or part of her wedding gift from her mother-in-law. And this parrot came from Panama, and it came from a market where the mother-in-law, who's non-native, had went shopping, and the indigenous people were in that market. And so she's seen some Indians in Panama, so therefore she bought this parrot for her Blackfeet daughter-in-law. And so how I got this parrot, I seen it. My friend was actually going to sell it in a garage sale, and nobody bought it, and so she was going to donate it. And And I said, I'd like that parrot, but I never knew that story. And she said, really? And I said, oh, where did you get it? You know, because she's like, that's when eBay was young. And she was like an eBay black belt bidder. She got all these cool things on eBay, but those days are gone. So she told me that story. And I thought about that story for a long time, that, you know, she had at that time married into a non-Indian family. And this parrot represented really different things to her. But this parrot had a story. And she is a friend that on my wellness journey is important. She was important to me to, it was somebody who we could sit around for hours and travel and talk about how we felt in terms of spiritual health, how we kept our spirit, you know, healthy, how we supported our spiritual journey through life. And so to me, that's what this parrot represents. And then also because an Indigenous person made this and was in that market so that they could keep their family fed, so that they could, through their artistic talents, because it's balsam wood, it's very light, that somehow this parrot had a journey back from Panama and now resides in a place of honor, because no matter where I move or I live, this parrot is there. And when I lived in another country, two other countries, a part outside the United States, my sister-in-law kept this parrot for me. So, you know, in my life, there are things that they're more than just an object. They carry the story. And for me, I always think of how much I have learned from and how much support on my wellness journey, being able to freely talk about the value of tending to your spirit with my friend. And that during this time, I can't readily go to her house, or I can't, you know, go. Sometimes I drop into her office, or, you know, sometimes we would, you know, we just have time together. But those right now, I have this parrot. And I think of all those good times I've had with people, with my friends that are out there that I haven't seen. So anyway, there. Wait, you got to see the back. And so behind me, I have two things. On this side, I have a paper quilt fabric art piece. And if you look at that piece, so look at that piece. There's an image of a cow, and you're saying, what does a cow have to do with spiritual momentum? Well, I'm going to tell you. But also there's a little piece in there that the maker, Franny, that made that, it says love. And some of the folks that I know from the Indigenous food movement that are foragers, gatherers, farmers, they put out this survey. It's actually from the Canadian movement of Indigenous food. And they asked, what is the most difficult non-Indigenous food for you to give up? And I had no question. It was easy. Beef, meat, not the milk. I can't have the milk because it won't be pretty. Let me just say that. But I just instantly said, well, beef is the hardest thing for me to give up, and of non-Indigenous food. And then I thought about it, what it means to many of my relatives right now that are ranchers, to all the non-Indians that are ranchers. And this time is changing their family. But it also reminded me of a conversation I had with Narcissus Blood, and he's passed on now, but he was one of those spiritual, intellectual touchstones for me in my wellness. I knew him over a long period of time, and he was always willing to listen, and he never dampened or uh, chastised when I had a question about the culture. He was a really free spirit. And one time I remember I was at this international, I better say it right, Healing the Spirit Worldwide conference in Hawaii. And there we were at one of the gatherings and stuff. And there's Narcissus and Alvin in Hawaii. And they live in the Canada across the line, or at that time. And Alvin still lives up there, Blood Reserve. But I had this conversation one time with him when we were talking about our ceremonial food, our food, that the parts of that are necessary, and how you show uh, you're not only feeding your spirit, but it's part of our way of life, of our spiritual strength. And I asked him because um, a certain part has come in to our ceremonies, and it's all over the community, not just in ceremonies. It's this red hot dog, and it's about, I mean, red like crayon red, not like, like beef red, or I was going to say horse meat, but that's a whole other power hour. Um, but uh, so I asked him, I wonder what that replaced, because just like um, fry bread has come into our homes. It's come through our journey of survival as Indigenous people, but it is not. It's a marker. It's a way of. If I used to joke with people, I hope to see a fry bread in a museum, that we put it there to say, you've taken us this far. Now we're going to go back to our good, our spiritual food, our Indigenous food. But that fry bread, if you want to say, has taken us through a time of survival and connection. It was even a star in a movie, everybody, right? You have 50 fry breads, but 100 people. What do? Hold up fry bread and tear it in half. Because that fry bread, I'm not saying it needs its own victory song or staff made, although that would be pretty cool as a like a contemporary art piece, that somebody made a staff out of fry breads. um, but so Narcissus and I were having this conversation about not only what got replaced in the introduction of eggs from other birds that are not, they weren't part of our life before. And so we were, and then many elders' homes that I went to, that in a part of my life when I was their gatherer for things they needed. I'll just put it like that. When they would feed me, because that was part of our connection when I went to their house, to bring food, but also they would feed me. Often they would have a bowl of boiled fat. It's like high, when it's buffalo, it's like high omega fats, or fish eggs, fish oil, sea oil. It's like those super omega 3s. But it was part of the ceremony of visiting. So we talked about that. We talked about that with Narcissus, because those pieces of fat that were presented in those elders' houses were beef. The connection that people had and how my people survived was because we not only continued to eat wild game and other, wild animals, but we survived by having beef. And particular to this place on earth, the way that they ranch or raise cattle here in this place where I live is we're privileged to have a lot of the indigenous grasses, and the healthy grasses still grow naturally. So the cattle that come from here are different. And the beef, I grew up with stories about how, if somebody got a beef, that's just how they talk, it went to many people. It went out to families. So even that story of beef, yes, it's not an indigenous food, but it came to our community, and we learned not only how to improve it, but we met that animal with the same values and spiritual principles of generosity to your relatives, care for your whole tribe. And that's really, I think, that um, I know during this time, there are many things opportunities, events, connections that people had to put to the side. And for me also, that the pandemic closed the border except for under certain circumstances. And we are part of the people that can cross the border. But just because other non-natives tell you you can do this, you still have the responsibility to look at it, to find the spiritual solution. And for me, I accepted the responsibility that my life and how I'm conducting it now has a greater impact. So I have to look at that. I have to look at, the elders in my family, to do my best effort. But I also have been feeling and having conversations with people about to really embrace our way of life, that we did not discriminate against family members, against tribal members, because we thought tribally. And that was our spiritual journey. And we're on that journey as a people collectively. We're on a collective spiritual journey during this time. And that's the thing about COVID. It's like that trickster, right? Sometimes I call it cousin COVID, but sometimes it's a trickster. It's an equal opportunity unwanted visitor. So as we see people heal from this, because I have a whole group of relatives now, they've healed from it. And they have come back in a way to regain their health this time. But they're also were nurtured through unheard, they didn't hear prayers of every voice that was praying for them, but they knew people were praying for them. And our love for them did not cease. So as we move forward, we know we do not want to, because what's happening in some of other communities about the stigma of having survived COVID. Instead, as Native people, when we survive, we celebrate. So if you are listening to this today, or you have a relative that has survived COVID-19, I send my love and I celebrate this moment that you are still here. Because we must use this time when we're remaking and keeping the connections in our community sacred. We must practice that spiritual solution when we are thinking about and strategizing how we move forward. And it's easy. It makes life less complicated, less dramatic. And it's okay, like I'm just going to say this, social media, this is in healing, in the things that we've all been through as people, you know, some people call it historical trauma or contemporary trauma, or, you know, you can use all these English languages. Sometimes you need like a recess. And so I'm going to invite you, when you're taking those breaks from everything that's going on, can you tell us your story? Can you share in some way through your art, through writing down, through uh, creating a note on Facebook about my pandemic victory story or my wisdom today? Or can you just share with yourself, this is what I know now? Because I think one of the gifts of this time is a lot of the static of is taken away. A lot of the things you had to filter through, and you start making different choices of what comes into your home, into your life. And I was also thinking about on my notebook there is something I seen that I today, this is what floated across my ticker tape, um, is, you know, all time in this experience for me and as a living being right now, all time is earth time. And when we had that snowstorm yesterday, or, you know, 2 days ago, and the mountains were blanketed white, there was an acknowledgement that I trust the earth to do what it needs. It's going to do what it needs to do to regain its health. And my pledge to that process is to be observant. And I kind of made a pact with myself um, that I would not whine about the cold, because in those 2 days when the snow came and the winds came from the north and the temperature dropped, and then it started sleeting and snowing, and, you know, the stairs to the front part of my house froze up. You know, that's always, but I'm going to tell you what I did. I didn't have that regular snow melt or sand or anything, but I had Epsom salts, so I sacrificed them so I could get safely down my stairs. But what I felt during that time was I could breathe. I could draw in that life-giving breath without having it laden so heavy by smoke, where my body was starting to be affected and my ears were starting to be affected. So I was enjoying, by the grace of the earth and the snow, the cold maker that brings the snow time, I was given a recess from that additional physical burden of breathing in heavy smoke. And I had, the day before, I had opened my door in the morning, and I got startled because I seen the wildfire smoke rolling down the land. And usually that is, I'm not a fire expert, but in my intelligence, that means the fire is pretty close. But it's because I live near the Rocky Mountains, and through the mountain passes, the the smoke follows, it rides on the air, right? And it had been riding down past my house, but it was far away from me. So when the cold came, I caught my breath. But it also reminded me that good things come. Many people, including my people, when the snow is on the ground, we turn towards a storytelling, a different type of cultural teaching. And so do people. I have projects that I work on with the cold weather. I make sure, you know, this year one of my big things is I have to buy new snow boats because I wore out everything else. And I approach that winter time looking forward to it, but also acknowledging that during right now, it means additional time at home. It means that I must prepare for that fall now that's coming. I must prepare for that winter time. And not only getting, extra food and stuff, I must prepare my spirit to make it through that time, to start routines, to say, I'm going to do this. And so I would like to suggest to all of you to in some way document your story of this time, because it is critical. All our cultural ways are built on the storytelling system of knowledge. And when I think about it, those are the spiritual stories to inform us of how we move forward in a good way. And it doesn't mean it all has to be, uh, you know, rainbows on feathers, because sometimes during this time, people are figuring out it, in their wellness journey how not to relapse, how not to pick back up those bad habits, that how to recover safety so that you could sleep, how to recover safety so that your home is kept as a place of nurturing. There's this really famous historical photograph of my people that has lived to this day. It's been transferred, it's been streamed, and it's of a lodge and two of the men sitting, and in the middle of them is a baby. That's how safe our homes were. So how are you creating, how are you recapturing those things that maybe you've struggled in your wellness and you've had victory over, for decades? How are you renewing that commitment to those practices? And are you developing new practices? Those are the stories. Those are the wisdoms that we will encourage each other through this next bit of the future. Because this time, we're not at the beginning, but right now, we haven't seen that sunrise of the end. And we will be different people. I was thinking of, um, the culture doesn't, the summertime is different for every culture. The time of great light, like in the north, is different. But the winter time is when you begin to, if you want to say, you're filling your spiritual basket, you're filling your bundle and preparing in real world ways to meet the spring. So I'd also like to say that I have been gifted many, many times and heard this in many ways in our community, that when the winter is heavy here and all the grass has went to sleep, people often say when they meet each other and then they part, hopefully I'll see you again when the green grass comes. I'll see you when the green grass comes. That's our prayer, that people make it through to see that green grass of spring. And so right now, like, the images, the things that families are going through because of the flames and the fires, or, the extreme heat. When I always over the last decade, I've told people, I'm going to have to migrate farther north because I'm not a hot Indian. I need cold. But so during that heavy winter time, that is really, what is your dream for the springtime, for the next spring, the next summer? What are you going to be doing? And I really want to encourage people to tell their story, document their story in some way, because in 10 years, 20 years, 100 years, you know, they're going to look back. I seen a beautiful piece that got released during this time about the jingle dress, about the Anishinaabe peoples, really gift to all Indigenous people to share those teachings. But to see how it was, one of its flowerings was during the pandemic of the 1920s, during that flu pandemic. And that dress has also been through social media, maybe in person, maybe you have a jingle dress. It has encouraged people beyond our communities during this time. And that's how important stories are. And I have a jingle dress, and I just wanted, to share it. I made that jingle dress. I only wore it once for a memorial for one of my friends, for Brenda Olson. And I have never wore that dress again. But I hang it up because through friendship, through her family, the Olson family, the Bird family on Peguas First Nation, through Mark Thompson, through all those beautiful people up at Matutu Lake, they were a part of my spiritual teachings. Dave Francis at Fisher River, they brought me during a time when there was an overload of demands and requests and integrating information. At a time in my life, they brought me to a different place. And I also just thought they are some very wealthy people, because where I live, our sweetgrass grows one blade here, the next one's way over there. But when I went to Peguas, this was my memory. We opened the car door and there was fields of sweetgrass, and it was really long. So my memories of them was, they smelled like sweetgrass. And so during our journeys, I think of things like that. And there's so much beauty coming out that people are sharing, songs that they're making. And I also wanted to encourage people. Sadie Buck, who's from the Haudenosaunee and was one of my voice teachers. One time we were talking about, there was the pressure, if you're gonna sing, you gotta have a #1 hit, gotta have #1 this, #1 that, #1 this, But she said her teacher, her father, had said, the definition of a good singer is willingness. And you sing, it's like you sing, the dancers dance. And the dancers dance, then you sing. And so it's like it's a constant cycle. So right now, we come from people from oral cultures. That's our tradition. And if somebody asks you to sing a song, or can you offer a song, or do you make songs? And often people will say, no, I can't sing. We can heal from that to bring singing back to the entire circle. So I wanted to give you from Jenny Lazon, from Canada, that's Métis, that I learned from as one of my voice teachers. This is one of the things that she had as first before we threw out, right? And through COVID, they're kind of giving singing a bad name. Yeah, the virus droplets can go out, but you should never stop singing during this time, or humming. So from Jenny Lazon, this is what she taught me. So da 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 da. So I would like to request of all of you out there in Facebook land today to hum, to prepare, announce to creation that you're getting ready to sing. And it's just simple, just hum. So I've enjoyed this time together. I love all of you, and I wish you the brightest, happy future filled with blessings, and that we all see the many green grasses of the springs to come. And when that final sunrise of this time rises, that we are all rising together. And so please tell your story. Have a good day and just enjoy the good breath that the Creator has given us. Thank you. Thank you from the parrot from Panama. Bye-bye.